The House Committee on Economic Competitiveness will come to order. Would the clerk please take attendance?
Chair Hoadley.
Here.
Representative Spelnack.
Here.
Altman.
Here.
Harris. Bagol. DeBoyer.
Here.
St. Germain.
Here.
Grant.
Here.
Brixey.
Here.
Tate.
Here.
Kofia. Mr. Chair, you have 8 members present. You do have a quorum.
Thank you. Representative Altman makes a motion to approve the previous committee minutes. The minutes are approved by unanimous consent. Today, the House Committee on Economic Competitiveness will hear testimony from Jennifer Rigdornek. I butchered that, didn't I? She'll introduce herself again when she gets up here and pronounce it correctly. Of the Michigan Municipal League, and Dawn Crandall of the Home Builders Association of Michigan. Ladies, thank you for coming today, and if you'd like to come take your positions, I know know the drill and the red button when you wish to speak, and start your presentation as you will. Please, a brief introduction so we pronounce your name correctly.
Well, you got mine right, so thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Just move this way. And members of the committee, thank you for inviting me today to speak on the housing crisis we are currently seeing and how we are working to create more supply in the state of Michigan. My name is Dawn Crandall. I am the EVP of Government Relations for the Home Builders Association of Michigan. Just briefly want to go over our mission. It is the mission of the HBA of Michigan to work positively to promote the building industry and impact legislative, regulatory, and legal issues affecting housing affordability, or attainability, as we have now changed it. 2, quick facts, we have 16 local associations, so our members join at the local level and they become members of the state and national. We have 4,500 members comprised of builders and associate members, so anybody who goes into that industry, realtors, insurance agents, landscapers, window installers, roofers. Our members are licensed and insured, and we recently celebrated our 75th anniversary last summer, which we had Representative Grant and Representative Tate at to help us celebrate our 75 years. And a little known fact, I was at the HBA for our 50th anniversary, and it is not my intent to be there for our 100th, just FYI. Our housing crisis can be tied to the lack of supply and demand. I always like to begin presentations with some basic statistics and numbers to really lay out the foundation of the conversation. So when we talk about supply and demand, if you look at 2005, there were roughly 54,000 single-family permits pulled in the state, and when you go to 07, that dropped to 15,000, and when you go to 09, we were at about 6,900. So we took a huge drop, and in 2024, there were 15,137 single-family permits pulled, and we are forecasting for 2025 15,728. I want to be clear that those are not years that we have peaked and valleyed. Those are years where we have slowly done, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. So it's not like in 2010 we went up and we dropped. Year after year we have increased, but we have never, like from 2009 until till now, that is not a lot of housing being built. When you look at the average house being 50 years old, we should be creating more supply to keep up with the aging household. February 2025, 910 single-family permits were pulled, and we're at about 1770 year to date. So there's basically three issues that impact our industry, and it's materials, labor, and regulations at the local, state, and federal level. I'm going to go back. So for materials, as we continue to be in a housing crisis, there are some issues we cannot control. Materials is one of them. Last building season, we heard from our members that the lack of concrete was a huge issue, and as you all are now having the road funding conversation, and how we're going to rebuild our roads. Roads use concrete, builders use concrete, and our building seasons are the same. So there's a competitiveness for concrete. And lot availability is a huge issue. If you talk to our members, the lack of buildable lots is a huge issue around the state on where our members can build. Labor is another issue. And if you look at this, graph of the total licensed Michigan builders in 2025, I knew we had an issue, but I really want to highlight if you go down to the 56 plus and the 66 plus, you're at about 24,000 licensees. And then if you look at the 18 to 34 age range, you're only at about 2,400 coming in. So for every, we're only bringing in about 10% of what's going out, which when you look at supply and demand, if you have lack of labor, your labor costs are more expensive. So we have a nonprofit. Oh, and then if you look at the median age of a builder, it's 58. So our builders in our houses are about the same age in this state. So if you look at what we're trying to do, we have a nonprofit called Skill to Build Michigan Foundation. And we, in 2020, started with March's Reading Month. We raised some funds. I brought some show and tell items. Billy the Build-A-Bear builds a house. Several legislators have read this. We raised enough money that we can provide to you if you chose to read books to leave with every student. We thought this was a good way to also educate parents on what the building process looks like. And, small words, bright pictures works well for everybody. We've added Katie, contractor, leads the crew. Katie is a cat who is building a house for a family of dogs. And then we also have an activity book, Let's Build Something Great, that works for 3rd through 6th graders. But one of the things that we've done is we are a credentialed certificate in the construction trades program in CTE. And we were fortunate to get some funding in fiscal year 23 that we could give this book, Build Your Future, the complete guide to a career in skilled trades, to every 8th through 12th grader in the state. And it was our goal that by doing that, we would show students that skilled trades is a career path for them, and then hopefully build up those CTE programs where they're available. So we have credentialed over 420 students since our inception. We continue to add programs to our credential program. And, we look at that building that next generation. And I will also say another issue that we're just getting ready to launch is a guidebook for veterans. If you go back and look at that, 34 to 45 age range, we have a lot of veterans in our state that fall in that frame. So regulatory, everybody's favorite topic. This is from our National Association of Home Builders. They do it every 5 years. And nationally, regulatory costs are about $94,000 on a home. And it breaks down, you can see like cost of applying for zoning approval. It breaks it all down in pre-construction and post-construction. But there are things that our members don't necessarily have control over. And so when we look at how this all impacts housing, time is money in our industry. And so the longer it takes to go through the process, the more it costs on a home. And as we look at different ways to bring down the cost of a home, there's incentives, which we did some of that, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the Housing Michigan Coalition that we launched in 2021. And the executive committee consists of the Michigan Municipal League, ourselves, the Grand Rapids Chamber, and Housing North, which is a nonprofit. We were lucky to have bicameral and bipartisan support. Representative Tate was part of that coalition as we kicked off. But in that legislative session, we passed 4 bills that we thought would be the easy, low-hanging fruit, which we found in housing is not necessarily the case. When we brought that executive committee together, we really threw a lot of ideas at the wall, and then we had about 80 groups behind us that were part of the larger coalition. And we sent out a Excel spreadsheet that said, what can you all get behind? Do you support this idea? Do you oppose it? Do you lean? Do you need more information? And we ended up with 4 bills that honestly we thought we would be able to get done pretty quickly. Gary Heidel. Get on the train, Gary. But But what we found was low-hanging fruit isn't always easy. So while those 4 bills, we had 2 senators sponsors and 2 Republican sponsors. They made it through the Senate in about a month, and then they came over to the House and they sat for a while. But those were incentive-based, so it was expanding neighborhood enterprise zones. I think at the time there were 8 communities that fell under NEZs. Yeah, and so we expanded that. We eliminated the need for state or federal funding for payment in lieu of taxes, or PILT, which we're seeing a lot of those projects come to fruition right now. And we created programs for projects 4 or less or 5 or more units. And each of these incentive-based programs help fill the gap. But the reason I bring these up is those bills were signed into law in December of 2023, and we're just seeing shovels get in the ground. So again, you talk about trying to fix the housing crisis. You can't necessarily do it overnight. But incentives are an important piece of the puzzle because it helps fill that gap funding.
Well, and to just add real quick on those tools, they sunset in 2027. So just as they start going, now they're going to sunset. So we'll need to extend those sunsets shortly.
The next session we worked on TIF package, and then last session we worked with Representative Grant on a package of regulatory reform issues, and we're excited to see those come back and have bipartisan support as we move forward this legislative session as well. But again, it's that lag time of trying to solve a problem of lack of housing. And if you look at the median cost of a new home in Michigan in 2025, it's $430,000. We're not talking an extravagant home. We're talking about probably an 1,800 square foot house. It is down slightly from 2024, but you need a qualifying income of $137,934 to meet that cost of new home construction in our state. I always like to show this chart. It shows who can afford housing at all levels. And kind of an important piece as we talk about the cost of housing is every time you raise the cost of a house by $1,000, you price out 3,393 households from being able to buy that home. So as we're going through code promulgation at this time, hopefully JCAR can meet before next Tuesday. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Codes are very costly. If you go back to that chart, it shows, every time you do codes in the state, it adds another probably $10,000. And then as you talk to the point of sprinklers are always an issue, is if sprinklers are going to be included, sprinklers alone will add about $20,000 to the cost of a new home. So you look at who that prices out in an area where housing is unattainable as it is. Those items aren't helpful when you look at the code, should be for health, safety, and welfare. So the HBA would like to recognize the work that Representative Grant did last session and her continuation to be engaged on regulatory reform issues. And we'd like to recognize Representative Tate as well for his leadership previously. And at this time, I don't know, Mr. Chair, if you want me to take questions now or if you would like me to turn it over to Jen.
Would you like to ask your questions now, Representative Tate? Would you like to?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Dawn, and also to the Housing Michigan Coalition and the work that you all have been able to do. And I can say too, the PILT legislation has been. We've been using that as a tool in the city of Detroit, and it looks like it'll be something that'll be incredibly useful for us in housing starts. The question that I have, I know you mentioned in terms of barriers to housing starts, you mentioned materials, labor, and regulation. Just to get actually both of your takes on this is, does one come after the other? So in saying, what I'm trying to say is, like, say if you work on one area, does the other piece follow with that? Or is it something as to where, like, we have to look at this in terms of policy prescriptions as we take each one on to move it ahead?
From our perspective, I think you have to almost look at all the pieces at the same time. So we are working on labor issues right now. We have a couple pieces of legislation that we're looking at. Part of the problem with the residential construction industry is we are deemed a hazardous industry. So unless you are in a career technical education program, if you are under the age of 18, you cannot use power tools on a job site. And so as you look at kids who graduate at 17, who even if they were in a career technical education program, and I always like to highlight the Washtenaw CTE program because it's a unique program that it's a public-private partnership. So it's part 501c3. I think they're on their 58th or 59th student build home. But the 501c3 provides the labor and the materials, and then the school provides the kids. But if there's somebody who has literally built a home through a construction trade program and they graduate at 17, our members cannot have them work on a house that power tools are used. So they can, I know, very puzzling. They can use a paintbrush, they can sweep, but they can't actually use a power tool to do anything. So we're looking at, Florida did a piece of legislation that where if a student went and got their OSHA 10 card and their supervisor also had additional safety training, was over the age of 21, we're probably going to add in, if they happen to have the Skill to Build Michigan certification, they would be allowed to work and do the work on a job site. Because otherwise we lose them, right? Like they may go doing something else and they may not come back. So I think as we look at the housing crisis, we really have to look at all the issues that we can address at the same time. Jen and I are pretty good at multitasking. And so it really has, materials a lot, we don't have a lot of control. Like air conditioners just went up 25%. We cannot control that, and that was due to an EPA regulation. So some things we just, increases housing without anything we can do or say. Lumber we see fluctuate. So when you look at that, shingles went up in 2019, and as in most things, once prices go up, they very rarely come back down.
Well, and I would just add to that, we agree. I think you have to work more holistically. And if we look across the country at the states who have done just the regulatory reform, there's been no impact on affordability. And really not a lot has actually been built. And with those regulatory changes, there's not going to be an affordability factor unless you require that any savings from those changes are actually passed on to the project. Otherwise, those savings are just whoever that person, is putting the project together. So there's got to be some kind of requirement to pass those savings on to the project. And then we see states like Texas who have very little regulations, and they have houses that are blowing down now with strong winds. So there's got to be a balance there between, regulatory and safety.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Altman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you both for being here to give us some brief testimony. You mentioned the codes process, new codes, how that
Yes.
add to construction costs.
Yes.
Michigan is in the process, or maybe have already adopted the 2021.
We have not yet.
Not yet. Do you anticipate that increasing cost even further with the adoption
We
of those new
do.
international codes?
We have actually taken the position because the 2024 is available, and because we are behind in that process, that we would like we would like JCAR to send the 21 back and request 24 be brought forward. We used to have a code promulgation process, and Governor Snyder eliminated the way that we did it, and Representative Tate actually had legislation his first term, along with Senator Daley in the Senate, that would look at the way codes used to be promulgated in the state. And the way they used to be done was each code had its own advisory council that was made up of stakeholders. And so public meetings would take place. All those stakeholders would come together. They would use the ICC code and bring it down and amend it for Michigan. We've always done that. Well, we always had done that. Now it's in the hands of the department. And we because they're looking at 21 and 24 as available, we'd like to start kind of current. And so we're waiting for JCAR to hopefully send those rules back and ask that the 24 be brought forward. If that does not happen, then the 21 will be sent to the Office of the Great Seal, and we have about 2 days left for that to happen.
Now, it's probably pretty obvious, but what would be the benefit of bypassing the 21 and going straight to the 24?
So the 24 is more energy efficient, and it gives builders more flexibility to reach energy efficiency, where the 21 is very prescriptive in what you have to do. So you have to have like R64 in the ceilings, where the 24 allows you to do it on a point system, and so you can attain more energy efficiency depending on where you put, like maybe you put in more energy efficient windows and then you don't need as much insulation. So it really gives the builder more flexibility to reach that energy efficiency.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Brixey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, ladies, for coming and talking to us this morning. Dawn, can you tell me, have there been any projections on what impact the tariffs are going to have on the industry? I mean, it seems like between appliances and, some of the, are we getting lumber from Canada? And what do you have any, what can you tell me about that impact? Is that just going to add on?
It will. Our national has done some studies on the lumber specifically, on the tariffs, and their numbers come in at between $7,500 and $10,000 per home as an increase.
Wow.
And that's just lumber. But to your
Wow.
point, if it's steel and aluminum, find an appliance in your home that isn't made of steel and aluminum.
Well, and they're mostly not made here either.
Correct.
Wow. And the furnaces and the, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
I would just add that we're already seeing from our members and some of the developers that we work through with some of our programs in our communities, just the threat of the tariffs are getting people to already up costs. They are shortening the guarantee for, a price when they've given a bid. That bid is only good for so long, like a very short time period now, just because of what could be coming forward or what may be.
We're going to be watching building permits to see if they slow down in anticipation of cost.
Wow.
Thank you for the questions and in our halftime show there. We'll continue on with you, Jennifer, if you'd like.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair and Committee, for having us today. Dawn and I have actually tried to take this on the show, on the road in other states, because when I talk to our National League of Cities and our other leagues around the country, and she's talked to the other home builder groups, they're like, we hate each other. And Dawn and I are like, we are spending holidays together sometimes. So. But yeah, so this is a unique partnership. As Dawn said, she was my first in-person meeting coming out of COVID. And we just came to the point of like, housing's an issue in our community. People need it. And she, needed it. And so how can we work together and not just be bumping heads all the time? So I'm Jen Rigtrink. It's Rig-Ter Inc. Just say it fast. You should have seen me when I got married. It was, my mother-in-law says it different than my father-in-law. Real quick, this is our team. I know some, we've met with some of you in one-offs and things, so I just wanted to highlight the full team here, especially Betsy. If you've been in our office for anything, Betsy's the one that keeps the wheels on our bus going. So this is the League's mission. We're celebrating 126 years. We have over 500 municipal members. We're really dedicated to inspiring positive change in what we believe are Michigan's greatest centers for potential, its communities. I don't want to get ahead of myself here. We really believe that communities are foundation for economic development. This is a graphic that I borrowed from the MEDC. I don't think they use it anymore, but this was a graphic we put together when I actually worked there a while back. And I think it really showcases, what we're trying to do in Michigan. People want place, whether we're trying to attract them or retain them. Place needs business in that activity, and business needs talent. So really at that foundation is the community. Is that community have things that talent people want to move there for, want to stay there for. I think we've done a really good job looking at business needs and talent needs in our state. We talk a lot of good talk about communities and municipalities, but that talk isn't always followed by actions. And you know, we really, again, think if you have a crumbling foundation, your house is going to eventually fall down. And so it's just like with schools. You cannot have successful schools in a failing city, just like you can't have a successful city with failing schools. So all of these things are working together. But again, we're really going to continue to push that foundation is the community itself. So in economic development, one of the things we really feel is a missing piece a lot of times, or an afterthought, has been housing. We need more of it, and we need to put it up as quickly as possible. And these are some of the issues, like Dawn touched upon: demand and supply, costs. Housing needs are going to differ depending, age groups. If you are looking at generational living, where you have your family, maybe your parents, grandparents, things are unpredictable, and a lot of times we are approaching things in very siloed paths. Like Dawn said, when we worked on the low-hanging fruit, it can't be that easy. It can't be that, specifics, but sometimes those are the hardest things to work on.
But I think it also is a good point to bring up in terms of when you were talking about your first slide. Part of the reason we chose our executive committee for the Housing Michigan Coalition, and if you look at it, it is municipalities, it's builders, developers, it's business, and it's nonprofit. And we were very, thoughtful in choosing that to show that it's not just a builder issue. It's a community issue. It's a business issue. If businesses can't hire talent because there's no place to live, we're all kind of intertwined. And I think we actually had a very large conversation on, when we go testify, do we testify individually or do we testify as a group? And as the Housing Michigan Coalition Executive Committee, we chose to go up as a group because we wanted legislators to see how we were all interconnected on the policies that we were supporting.
Yeah. So a couple of weeks ago, we had our annual Capitol Conference. Thank you to those of you who were able to join our legislative breakfast, interact with our members. But during that conference, we took a quick survey on asking our members what are some of the obstacles they have to housing. So specifically, we asked, what's your biggest hurdle to housing development? You can see what's up here. 39% said lack of vacant property to develop. As you heard Dawn, there is a lack of available lots for new build. There is a lot of opportunity for rehabilitation, rehab, or possibly knocking down and rebuilding from that. So I wouldn't take that lack of vacant property to develop, that's just for new builds. They also said the lack of builders and developers. A lot of them, they put out an RFQ or RFP, and they end up with the same folks wanting to do the same thing versus maybe a new kind of housing type that they're seeing that there's a market for. Other things that they talked about was the gap, the cost, what people can afford versus the cost to actually build something. Gaps in the funding stacks, the lack of gap financing, and issues with state gap incentives. And I would say that last one really has to do with the processes, and I know that our departments are trying to be good stewards, or are being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. But within that process, you have a developer or builder. They go through the local site plan approval process. They get that approved at the local level. You have to have that to get a letter of intent from the state that you can be, we're going to offer you this towards your project. So a lot of times you're working along that process with your pro forma using a very specific possible incentive and amount. Now you get past the local approval, you get to the point of where you're working with the state agency, and now they come back with less than what you were expecting or needed for the project to happen. So that developer or builder now has to go back, redo the project, which involves scaling back, taking things away that they've already told that municipality and those community members they were going to do. And that causes a lot of tension at the local level. Now you're going back through that process again because you're changing your site plan from what it was approved. Now you've got to go back through and get reapproved for something different. And so it's not necessarily that developer's fault. You know, they're trying to fill the gap. They don't get the gap filler that it's needed for the project to do it. And so that causes tension and causes more time. And as Dawn said, time is money, and time is money for any and everyone, not just the private sector. Some of our funding incentives are misaligned with the housing, the community housing needs. We're seeing a lot of folks are able to build luxury second homes, things like that, but that's not really what the community needs. And then NIMBYs, not in my backyard. Our members are not all NIMBYs. Our members are dealing with the NIMBYs that show up in a setting like this where they are having a open public meeting and they're trying to talk about a new project or something, and you have people showing up who are in your district, who vote for you, who are saying no. And so it really puts those folks in that kind of predicament of, okay, do I go with what my constituents are telling me, or do I go with what I know our community wants and has in our plan and is doing our regulations to allow? So NIMBYs is a huge issue for us, as well as just for the overall development and planning process. Zoning regulations. Whoops. Did that change by itself? Zoning regulations are a piece of the puzzle. They are one piece of the puzzle. State investment's a piece of the puzzle. There's different ways to approach regulatory reform. And then looking at research and data, using that to make these changes is very important. We have the Housing Michigan data portal, which any community, you can go and look up in your district what's going on, the needs, the permits, I believe, that have been pulled. It links to those regional plans that's going on as a factor of the first statewide housing plan that was done a few years ago. So it's a piece. It's very important. We asked our municipalities that were at CapCon, have you undertaken any zoning reforms? 66% of them said yes. 18% of them said they're in process of working on these. 10% said no, and 5% said unsure. This was an anonymous, we were using Slido, so I can't tell if, somebody was actually the planning director or zoning administrator, or if it was a council member that, isn't on the planning commission kind of thing. So we wanted to know. So 84% of the folks, though, there did say they have done or are in the process of updating their regulations around zoning for housing. A lot of that has to do with the technical assistance that's been provided by the state. We're finally starting to see some return on investment that the state has, put money into the Redevelopment Ready Communities program that's been going on now for a decade plus, and with the Housing Readiness Grant program over at MISHDA, where municipalities can apply for planning or zoning technical assistance around housing. That was funded the last 2 years and has been fully prescribed to. But it takes time. You got to go through that process. You got to update your plan. You got to update those zonings and then put them into practice. So we need the time to see the fruit of, that planting that's being done right now with that technical assistance dollars that are helping to update antiquated zoning regulations. We talk about the 5 L's: labor, lumber, land, laws, lending, and how those are greater than what you can get, what people can afford, the price of a home. And so looking at those all together and not just siloed as we're trying to deal with this housing emergency. Location. I was very surprised in a meeting a month or so back when I was asking a question about funding of projects, and Does the state prioritize where these projects are funded? And the response was no, we don't have any smart growth policies, which I understand the state doesn't have to have smart growth policies just to look at where the state dollars are being invested and where's your biggest return on that investment. The picture on the left is a field. There's not infrastructure out there for a housing development versus building a home on that vacant lot in a neighborhood where you have existing roads, you have existing water and wastewater management. So just looking at those costs, I'm not saying you can't build in the field. That's not what I'm saying, but looking at the actual costs of building in one or the other. Now, one of the problems with that too, though, is I understand some builders do not want to do one-offs. Maybe they'll look at an infill project in a community where there's many missing teeth or rehab that can be done as well. There are builders that want to just go out and build that new subdivision. So there's got to be a balance of that. So, but we believe return on investment and looking at our communities. Many of our municipalities that are regional centers, employment centers, they are built out communities. And that's where that investment or looking at conversion of existing office and commercial that's no longer being used into housing, looking at those commercial corridors where you have existing roads, and like I said, water and sewer, looking at those and trying to prioritize sometimes, we can, I think, get some quicker results in those areas in building when you're converting timeline-wise. There's different ways to approach some of this. We talk about motivating change with our members, the carrot versus the stick, and a lot of the regulatory reform that's been done in other states, whether it's Montana, it's been, I think Utah did some things, Minnesota. There's always been an incentive there, whether it's an infrastructure pot of money, it's technical assistance dollars for municipalities, or it's been leveraged for some other kind of legislative priorities and win. There has been a motivation to change and to do that versus, okay, you've changed this, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be prioritized now for housing projects. We want to recognize the work that's done in our communities. Many of them have already undertaken these reforms and have done them. If the city of Muskegon can pass these reforms, most anywhere can get them done. But they just did it. They're not seeing the results. We had someone that came and testified with us last year from the city of Dexter. They have allowed duplexes by right. It's probably going on 3 or 4 years now, and they haven't had one application come in for a duplex project. So yeah, you can do that. You can make that preemption, but it doesn't mean it's actually going to bring more duplex projects. So let communities make that choice and do that on their own. So we've looked at talking about reforms instead of one-offs. Let's make a list of reforms. I believe this is how Montana did it, but Montana also very much scaled that to population size and some other factors. It only addresses or only applies to their larger city urban areas, which isn't a lot in Montana. It's more of a rural place. But building partnerships and then looking at a mix of strategies and solutions. The research and data, we kind of already talked about some of this in looking at. So that's our presentation, or my presentation, and happy to answer more questions. Oh, I also wanted to show real quick. So one of the projects that the state helped fund that our policy and labs team has worked on was the creation of pattern book homes. So if you think back to the old Sears Roebuck housing kits, is based off that. So we've been working with our members. There's multiple homes in here where it's a duplex, a triplex, a fourplex. The second one has accessory dwelling units in it, and our members adopting those so these can be by right permitted. We've been working and talking to manufactured housing manufacturers. No one has been able, though, to put one together at an affordable cost just yet, because we even have some of our communities asking for kit homes so that they can sell the lot, include the kit for the home, and it's already approved, ready to go. The city of Jackson has been doing a great program that they really based off of their American Rescue Plan dollars, 100 homes, they call it, where they're giving you the lot if you pick one of the home designs that they've already approved to put on that lot. And they were using the American Rescue Plan dollars to help set that program up and get it going. And it's really a model for other communities. So I brought copies of these if anyone doesn't have them and would like them.
Big show and tell people.
Yeah.
Thank you both for your presentation today. It looks like we satisfied the questions during halftime. So again, I appreciate the presentation. It's very imperative that the members of this committee understand what's going on in our communities and with what's affecting the boots on the ground. So again, I appreciate you coming in and presenting today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, members, for your questions. And seeing there are no further questions, Representative St. Germain moves to excuse all absent members. There being no objections, absent members are excused, and the committee will hereby stand adjourned.